help us to know the wisdom and assurance, and help us to be imbued by the sacred word and the mysteries offered at the altar, that we may give beautiful, fitting words of praise every day of our lives. And we make this prayer through Christ our Lord. By means of this brief review, last week we entered into the Second Vatican Council's document on the sacred liturgy, Sacrosanctum Concilium. And three principal themes that we heard about were full, conscious, active participation, which we kind of discussed at length. The fundamental element of that being that we are being present in the liturgy, not necessarily doing, and the difference between being and doing. The two are not opposed, but the one definitely presupposes the other. We also talked about the important role of the liturgical catechesis. In the mind of the council, this was the second and most important role of the liturgical renewal, was that we're truly able to explain through the liturgy itself, to understand through the liturgy itself what it is we celebrate. And so the liturgical priority of catechesis was elevated. Understanding the rites, the actions, the words, the sounds, the smells, how all of those things help us to understand better what it is we're doing as we worship God and enjoy a more full, conscious and active participation in the liturgy. And a third theme that we discussed throughout was the vertical and horizontal orientation of liturgy. The two are never separated, but one does have a greater priority than the other. That we're always fundamentally worshiping God. And that's always the basis of anything we do as a liturgical assembly. That we're there to worship God himself. And so, while secondarily and very importantly we have a horizontal orientation, anytime we categorize the horizontal over the vertical, we diminish the heavenly reality as we heard about in the Sacrosanctum children. We diminish our heavenly foretaste of Jerusalem when it becomes more about us and not about God. And so these three themes kind of discussed very specifically in the renewal itself kind of start to take flesh. And some of the things we covered were the idea of what full conscious and active participation was, or what it is and what it is not. We also talked about the need for understanding the greater role of sacred liturgy, how that will inform us to be better and more able to adore God, and how liturgy, or the sacred scripture itself, informs our knowledge of the liturgy. And third, maybe something not so germane to everything, but something very specific that we did want to talk about last week, was the use of Latin in the liturgy. We saw very carefully as we went through the document itself that at no point did the church explicitly condemn the use of, nor did she ever actually take it away from it. In fact, faithfully supported Article 54, care must be taken to ensure that the faithful may also be able to sing or say together the Latin parts of the ordinary of the Mass. And so we discussed very briefly some of the implications of the liturgical reform proposed on these two main pillars, with this also being a theme of mine. So tonight we're going to talk about some of the specific applications of what I would call the theory of reform in terms of acculturation, in terms of the Eucharist, and in terms of the divine office, the sacred calendar, the liturgical calendar, and finally sacred music and sacred arts and architecture. And so without further ado, we'll get started this evening with numbers 37 through 40, norms for adapting the liturgy to the temperament and traditions of the peoples, aka acculturation. I believe I left at least one part on this second handout, on the first handout today that's looking at the We'll start with SC 37, distinguishing that which is fitting and worthy of the liturgy and that what is not, which is not. Sacrosanctum Concilium 37 says this: even in the liturgy, the Church does not wish to impose a rigid uniformity in matters which do not involve the faith or the good of a whole community. Rather does she respect and foster the qualities and talents of the various races and nations. Anything in these people's way of life which is not indissolubly bound up with superstition provided they harmonize with the true and authentic spirit. And so we see this very clear phrasing. Anything in these people's way of life which is not indissolubly bound up with superstition and error has the potential, the word sometimes is used, has the potential for a place in the life of the liturgy. And so this aspect of acculturation becomes a very popular word in the post-conciliar era. What is it about the culture that we can incorporate into the sacred liturgy? The church had seen this historically manifest in her different rites as she spread in the Mediterranean. One of the places in this world that still holds to a very predominantly cultural rite is the Ambrosian rite, used in Milan, Italy. That's the only place in which it's permitted. But you also see other manifestations in Spain and France, particular rites suited to the place. But what do these incorporate? They incorporate the general structure of the Roman liturgy and anticipated the good coming out of these cultures and how those goods can influence the liturgy. So it was a particular expression of a people that was not contrary to the nature of the liturgy itself. Now, in our lifetimes, brothers and sisters, we have encountered some things that may not be considered real acculturation. So I want to kind of start by asking the question, what is culturally important enough to us in these texts that we think it is part of our cultural aspect? It's true. Maybe I should apply this question more specifically. Is there anything in our culture as these texts that we think is important enough that it be part of sacred liturgy? This doesn't mean we don't have a rich culture. It just means we don't have a rich liturgical culture. We've only had a church here for some 45 years. But yeah, maybe this isn't your native home. You said it. Yes. But that's not something I'll include in this. What you said so that everybody could hear it is one of the things for an outsider looking in, it's very true, is how Protestant our culture is. Even our Catholic culture is very imbued by our Protestant mentality. But looking at this specific question, are there things, we can't identify anything in these texts. What about America? Is there anything in American culture that we think has to be integrated into our liturgy? Are there things about American culture which are not contrary to liturgy, and maybe we could implement? So there are, what American music do you think would be culturally specific that we would say is American and would in some way help us to better understand the liturgy? Patriotic. And I heard maybe a flag. Texas national anthem. Keep your mouth shut, sir. So shaking hands. The English language. So these things, as a group, we're saying, are important enough to us culturally that they should be considered, at least considered, to become normative in the way we celebrate our liturgy. I'm asking this kind of rhetorically. In some way, I want to know, obviously these are all things that are important to us, right? But do they, in concert with what we have just read, Sacrosanctum Concilium 37, and understanding the fuller import of this statement in relationship to the rest of the Roman Rite and the rest of the universal Catholic I going to break union with Rome if I don't get to hear patriotic music, if I don't get to have an American flag, if I don't get to shake hands, if I don't get to hear Mass in my language? Mine on the last. So there's some things we're almost willing to hang our hats on. But when I literally say schism with Rome is the opposite. No, I don't think any of us in our heart. None of us in our hearts want that. And so we have to kind of have an ordering, the right ordering of these kinds of things, these elements of acculturation. An easy thing to kind of draw attention to that's not so much in our culture, but we can make some reference to, is the implementation of liturgical dance. There is nothing native about liturgical dance in America. Nothing. No part of our culture, sorry, is imbued so much with dance that it has to become a normative part of our liturgy. Now, there could be an argument made for African American slaves who came here 170 years ago that part of their culture was dancing. And in a particular parish, in a particular place, that may be acceptable. But is that a normative instruction for the faithful of America? No. Is it normative that every church has patriotic music? Think of an Italian parish in New York City and turn of the century. Should they have their own Italian national anthem being played in their American Catholic Church? No, but they might have. It wasn't something that they forced on other people. Likewise, we as Americans can't go to Mexico and say, we want to hear our national anthem at our Mass. You know, we start to hear how this gets really unwound. It becomes about us. That horizontal dimension becomes so important, and we're starting to sacrifice that vertical dimension towards God. And so, elements of acculturation that are genuine, that truly speak to the good of the culture and help us understand better the liturgy, there's nothing wrong with those things. So maybe the expanded use of the vernacular for people who really have no connection with Latin at all. You know, we don't have that cop-out on us. Whereas the English languages have a lot of connections to Latin. So some of the elements of Latin are very familiar to us, whether we realize it or not. Hispanics, likewise, and French speakers have such a deep connection with the Latin language that the elements of it that are present are not foreign. If I go to Mozambique and try to speak Latin, it's a different story altogether. And we need to understand how that culture needs to be evangelized. And through the liturgy is the primary means of that evangelization. So what can we do so that the liturgy is better understood and relevant indeed for those people so that they can understand better who God is and what this church is that He's given. But these elements of acculturation, inasmuch as they are not bound up in superstition or bound up in those things that are erroneous to the faith, can be used. So, for instance, shaking hands. There's nothing inherently evil about it. In an age of people who are very afraid to get sick, I would argue that there's something to argue there. If we're hung up, we can't receive communion on the tongue, but we're going to shake everybody's hands. There's a disconnect somewhere. And so we need to understand what's kind of our cultural thing versus what's the reality. Another example would be you mentioned the adoption of certain styles of music. Certain styles of music are okay. The church explicitly talks about those styles of music. Is jazz liturgical music? No. That's a very easy thing to say now. 30 years ago, that wouldn't have been the case. There would have been many people who would have argued on the principle of acculturation that we've got to have jazz in our liturgy. Now, I like jazz. I love jazz. But of itself, classical jazz is complete crazy. It doesn't have a form. It doesn't have harmony and melody like a classical art, like a classical music form. It's free flow. And so to say that somehow or another is in concert with the nature of liturgy itself seems very just counterintuitive. So we need to understand better this acculturation. What does this really mean? And some good examples of it, as we think, and I want you to kind of think about that. What are some of those good examples of acculturation maybe that we've seen? Let's turn again our attention to the document itself. In Sacrosanctum, Concilium number 38, it says, provided that substantial unity of the Roman Rite is preserved, for its division should shall be made when revising liturgical books for legitimate variations and adaptations to different groups. This should be borne in mind when drawing up rites and determining rubrics. So the church, in her wisdom, again, going back to that first statement, she realizes she can't pose rigid uniformity all across the world, because you have to take into account the different cultures of people, the different traditions, the different ways they understand, something as simple as touching a person on the head. How in some cultures that's sacrosanct, in some cultures that's a sign of disrespect. Little differences like that have to be discussed. But we never do so in a way that substantially draws us away from what the Roman liturgy is itself. And so our liturgical books, our rubrics, and our rites all have to reflect that substantial unity. That we're not doing anything here in Texas that would be so radically divergent from what they do in Rome that somebody from Rome came over here and saw us doing a baptism and they were like, what are you doing? That means we've got too far away. And so our liturgy kind of has a self-preserving aspect to it that very clearly is in the mind of the liturgical reform at the Second Vatican Council. A very germane example of this for each of the authors considered as plain today is the new revised translation of the Roman Missal. This is a document which takes into account our cultural sensitivities to the great extent, our language, the need to understand things in an American English language, but also reflects beautiful and substantial unity with the physical liturgical tradition, which is written in Latin. This is just one, a myriad of examples I can give you to show uniformity with document or with Sacrosanctum Concilium. The things that we may not see as being fitting for our Mass, things such as the Lord be with you and with your spirit, at first seem so kind of counterintuitive, because we're like, this is what I've been doing for 35 years. I've been saying and also listening. But when we think about it, when we roll back to kind of our vision, we pull back our scale and look at it with the eye of God, it's a dialogue with the priest who's standing in the person of Christ. It's an understanding that we are spiritual beings, that we have something to us that's more than just this flesh. That it's a dialogue between God and His people. And so something as simple little change helps us understand better the beauty of being this universal church in union with Rome, in union with this Latin text even, but also recognizing how it applies to us in our cultural situation. And so a good opportunity to explain why we did the revised translation, what the meanings of the text were, was an opportunity for each of you to experience good elements of Acculturation that at the same time stayed away from what I would consider, what the Dr. Newman considers anything which is bound up with superstition and heresy. Are there any questions before I move to the next section of Sacramental? Nicole, please. The original Apostles' Creed. The use of the Apostles' Creed. I'm going to come back to that and a couple of other issues at the end of the night. Is that all right? Because that's on my radar. But a brief statement on that. One is because the Constantinople Creed, did I get that right? Is a more universal creed in the sense of it's an ecumenical. The Apostles' Creed, although agreed upon by Eastern and Western fathers, has been more commonly recited in the Western Church. So the doctrine of Nicene Creed expresses that creed as well. And it's more substantially dogmatic. largely the reason we do the night. Okay, moving on. And these are just a few tidbits of humor, I think, more so than anything in light of where we are in our specific place in this particular time. Sacrosanctum Concilium number 41 talks about the bishop is to be considered the high priest of the flock. Therefore, all should hold in greatest esteem the liturgical life of the diocese centered around the bishop, especially in his cathedral church. It's very germane to us who are parishioners here at this church. I say it's a point of humor because so many of you have experienced how different it is to be at this parish versus the parish down the road. You know, you see the solemnity, the level of solemnity, the gravitas, so to speak, of the liturgy is always elevated with the ordinary being present. And it's beautiful. It's what the church envisions. That the bishop, again, as kind of the chief shepherd, the chief liturgist of the diocese, is going to set forth the best example. And the liturgical life of the diocese itself is kind of centered around the cathedral parish. This is why we have all of our big masses, despite the fact that it's not the biggest church. I can name four off the top of my head that are bigger than the cathedral. Some of them within driving distance, bigger churches, but this is where the cathedral is, the chair of our bishop. So it's very important that we always be aware that this is a special place in the life of the church, in the life of the diocese. In number 42, the role of the priest in the parish, it's highlighting that above all, in the celebration of the Sunday Mass is where we come to encounter the life of the parish. So we are called, that Sacrosanctum Concilium saying that account, calls us to that Sunday Mass, that celebration of the greatest of that day. And we're going to kind of come back to that towards the end of the season and talk about the Lord's Day and the life of the liturgical changes. Finally, the promotion of a liturgical commission. Are there liturgical commission members here present tonight? This is something the Vatican Council, Sacramental Council vision. And Johnny come lately, we started having liturgical commission stuff earlier. So we're catching up. We're reading documents, we're holding on. So next I want to move to the most sacred mystery of the Eucharist. And this part of the Sacrosanctum Concilium is very beautiful because of the language. It's rather brief in what it actually explains. But I would encourage each of you, if you have a chance, to just go back and look online or read on your own time numbers 47 and number 48 of Sacrosanctum Concilium. It really is a beautiful and concise theology of the Mass and what's going on. It really highlights the priestly role of Christ in the liturgy. That Christ himself offering himself for us in this one sacrifice which is perpetuated by the Church is a great reminder to each of us of God's loving sacrifice. And so those, like I said, those two are basically just theology, but looking at that, it'll help maybe us to better understand what's going on every Sunday morning. But then she goes on to talk about the decrees. So this is the very specific instruction about what's going to change. And so she says in number 50, the rite of the Mass is to be reviewed in such a way that the intrinsic nature and purpose of its several parts, as well as the connection between them, may be more clearly manifested in the devout and active participation by the faithful be more easily achieved. So to highlight, the intrinsic nature and purpose of its several parts must be revised so that we understand better the relationship of the nature of liturgy and the parts of liturgy. So we know why and what. The being and the doing. That's whole principle. Why we're doing what we're doing. Being active, being present, doing what we're doing. And so we want to hold up, and they may be more clearly manifested for the devout and active participation of the faithful. So it goes back to understanding why we do it, what we do, so that we can have greater faithful, active participation. Sacrosanctum Concilium number 51 wants to go on and speak about the role of sacred scripture in the liturgical cycle. And it speaks of the need to open up more lavishly the riches of God's Word. And the result of SC 51 is our modern lectionary. The lectionary is kind of one of the great fruits of the council inasmuch as it really saw to the work of expanding your regular exposure to sacred scripture. So the lectionary is now in a 3-2 cycle. There's year A and B, or 1 and 2, I'm sorry. There's year 1 and 2 for your daily readings, and then there's A, B, and C cycle for your gospel readings. And so, Matthew, Mark, and Luke really making up the composite of the 1, 2, and 3 cycle, or the A, B, and C, and then 1 and 2 is really just Old Testament and New Testament, and predominantly you see more of the Old Testament being inserted into the life of the church, which for many of you may remember prior to the council was not the case. That the Old Testament was largely spoken of and alluded to, but wasn't actually read in the sacred liturgy itself, except at specific times. And so the lectionary opened up the vista, so to speak, in the language of the Fathers of the Council, opened up new horizons and vistas for us to dwell upon in the sacred liturgy. Sacrosanctum Concilium 52 goes on to speak of the role of preaching. 53 specifically speaks about the restoration of the prayers of the faithful and after the gospel, on the homily, on Sundays, and holy days of obligation. So here's an area where some of you experience differences. Daily Mass in some parishes you have prayers of the faithful, right? Not the cathedral or the chapel. Why is this? One, because it's not called for by the ordinance of the liturgy itself. Two, for very human reasons, Mass gets real long when everybody starts mentioning their prayer of the faithful. And so in order to prevent that, we know that the church is always praying for the principal things. We know we're praying for our Holy Father. We know we're praying for our nation. We know we're praying for our beloved dead. But the church highlights, specifically in the sacred constitution of the liturgy here, the role and the restoration of the prayers of the faithful in the Sunday Mass and holy days of obligation, recognizing those are days when more of the faithful are gathered in prayer and using the time of God. So, Sacrosanctum Concilium 54, we have already seen this. It's more about Latin in the liturgy and the role of Latin being sustained. It is Sacrosanctum Concilium number 55, the distribution of the sacred species under both kinds. Very specifically, this speaks of 3 places: the newly ordained in the Mass of their ordination, the newly professed in the Mass of their religious profession, and the newly baptized in the Mass which follows their baptism. So for those who are coming in to the church as individuals. Now later on, we see there's literally hundreds of documents about implementation of the liturgy. And one of the things you start to see is us going from one extreme to the other. Whereas previous to the council, distribution of the sacred species under both kinds was really reserved for extremely rare cases. The proliferation of it and the normalization of it has led us to the point now where we have it in every Mass. This is specifically an American reality. Most of the rest of the world, recognizing that the true presence of Christ in the body itself, the body and blood is present in the body itself, does not see a need for proliferation of ministers or distribution under both kinds. Part of that is very practical. We're the only country in the world that can afford to buy that much wine. But also it's very theological, the recognition that there is the fullness of the mystery is present in the body. So there's not a need to go beyond that. And there's actually a need for us to enter more deeply into that idea of the mystery. We can pierce the loving and sacred and moving heart of Jesus. Blood pouring out to us, even if we're not consuming Christ's blood. This is part of us being able to use our sacred imagination to be able to recognize the sacred despite the fact that the physical presence may not be alive. I want to move on to the next part of the document. Is there any questions? That's a very basic structure of what's coming. The next kind of 4 parts are going to cover more detail about these guidelines. The other sacraments and sacramentals is the next section, numbers 59 through 82. If we look at number 60, it says, Holy Mother Church has moreover instituted sacramentals. These are sacred signs which bear a resemblance to sacraments. They signify effects, particularly of a spiritual nature, which are obtained to the church in existence. By them, they are disposed to receive the chief effects of the sacraments. In various occasions in life are rendered holy. So what are some examples of sacraments. Holy water. Yes. Sorry? Candles. Okay. Are any of these things superstition? To some they are, but do we as Catholics, do we see how this can lead us to deeper reverence and devotion to the Blessed Sacrament itself? Do we see how the relationship, and it's clearly stated, this is not superstition. And number 60, I think, says something beautiful. It says, they signify effects, particularly of a spiritual nature, obtained through the Church's intercession. It's not that unto themselves, an image unto itself has a little bit of value, some value. So an image of a car, it helps to give us an idea of what a car looks like. An image blessed for the specific purpose of veneration, to lead us in our hearts and our minds to greater devotion to Christ himself, the love of our mother, Mary. Yes, that has a real effect on us because God recognizes that we're physical beings. And many of us need the help of these physical things, these sacramental signs, to help us more deeply understand the effects of sacraments properly. And so we don't hold these things to be superstitious. However, we understand that they have a proper role that is in service to the greater role of liturgy. That overall, all sacramentals should lead us in some way to better understand sacraments, specifically those outward signs of Christ and His grace. And so, if my devotion to Our Lady and the love I have for my rosary distracts me from receiving Holy Communion, that's a disordered devotion. It's a disorder. The sacramentals no longer serve as the purpose of being the sacrament. It's become such a preoccupation that it's distorted our understanding of who God is and what God's love for us is. And so we have to be mindful of how we approach sacraments. If I have such scrupulosity that when I go into a house and there's not a holy water font, I tell these people to go into hell, we're in trouble. Because that's not reality. That's superstition. That's becoming such a preoccupation that it's being divorced from the rest of our faith. And so the Church goes on to speak just very briefly about the need to revise some of the sacramentals and some of the rituals associated therein. And I can tell you that to a great extent, I think it's been dumbed down a little too much. I personally, most of you, if I've blessed your homes or if I've blessed an article of yours, I use the Old Rite in English because the language is much more beautiful and efficacious. We kind of strip down the prayers, like for blessing the car, and basically as I walk outside, I throw some holy water on it and say, your car is blessed. That doesn't remind us of the beauty of sacred scripture that's present in the Old Rite. So I really prefer to use that because it reminds me, it talks about Elijah, it talks about the consumption of sacred scripture, it talks about how when I go into a house, the fatness of the Lord is going to be present there, how it's a place where we pray, where people receive the last rites. This language is indicative of the holiness of what's going on. And so while I do hold that book in high respect, at the same time, there is a need for reform. If it took me 45 minutes to bless a house, that's a concern. Most of you don't have 45 minutes to walk around the house blessing it. So the good of maybe some of these revisions has been understanding a little bit more who we are as humans. But I don't want to deny the fact that the language itself should also speak to the reality. So the sacramentals, a simple sign of God's love for us, needs to be imbued with a devotion that leads us back towards, most importantly, the Eucharist and towards the Lord. The next section is on the divine office, which for most of you, because you're not obliged to pray it, I'm not going to drag you through it because I want to get to the sacred music, sacred architecture section. But a few things to be aware of. Sacrosanctum Concilium number 84 has beautiful love language about the relationship of the divine office and what it means in the life of the Church. So I just want you to close your eyes and listen with your sacred ears to this language. Mother Church says, the divine office lives that the whole course of the day and night is made holy by the praise of God. Therefore, when this wonderful song of praise is correctly celebrated by priests and others imputed to it by the church, or by the faithful praying together with the priest, then it is truly the voice of the bride herself addressed to the bridegroom. It is the very prayer which Christ himself, together with his body, addresses to the Father. And so the divine office of liturgy of the hours, brothers and sisters, has a beautiful role in the life of the church. And we've seen a proliferation of it with the lay faithful, which is often at the council. So it's great to see, like here we pray morning prayer together every day before we offer the Holy Sacrifice of the Mass. And it speaks to the role of this communal prayer, this prayer that really is the prayer of the universal church, that we're united with Christ the head and his body in a loving praise, adoration, and praise of the Father. Now, practically speaking, some of the things that we saw implemented through this were, one, that the hymns to be used were to be restored to the original form, which is failed largely. I want to promise all of you. It's still an area where we're seeing. If you notice, if you go to morning prayer, when I usually say the same hymn, because that's the church really wants. There's like 140 hymns to go with morning prayer. None of us are going to learn 140 hymns in our life. So let's keep it limited to what is germane and important to the prayer itself. But for all of you, the most important line here is Sacrosanctum Concilium 100. And I say this kind of chastising myself. Pastors of souls should see to it that the principal hours, especially Vespers, are celebrated in common in church on Sundays and on the more solemn feasts. Do you know of a place that does this? I do too. Where's your place? Mary Magdalene on Sunday afternoons they have Vespers. It's wonderful. I know a place in Austin, Texas where they do Sunday Vespers and actually Sunday Common, which is very beautiful. We do the primary prayer in the morning here, which is a very beautiful thing. But really, this is a big point to the church, and the reason is that it helps us to keep the entire day of Sunday holy. So we come back to church at the end of our day, give praise with the gathered assembly to God, our Almighty Father, generally in front of the Blessed Sacrament. It's something we did in the seminary. I do miss it. Now, admittedly, here we have 16 Mass, so we didn't necessarily do it in the cathedral, but it's an option we can make an exercise as a Catholic. So I'm encouraging you to lay faithful now that you're empowered with the documents to talk to your pastor about this. I'm not the pastor. Yes, ma'am. There's some very distinct differences. The Book of Christian Prayer, which is what most lay faithful use, does not take into account as much of the sanctual cycle. It doesn't have all the, I would say, readings of the fathers, the canonical readings and preachings of the apostolic fathers. So it's devoid of some of the richness of the 4 volume set. But for most people, it does provide a very beautiful insight into the life of the faithful church. It's got the 4-week cycle of presbytery, which is what's kind of fundamentally. No, it doesn't. It has, on very limited days, it'll have the office of readings. But for the most part, it's morning prayer, evening prayer, night prayer. Night prayer stays the same throughout the week. So if you're going to start with the liturgy hours, that blessing that night prayer. And that's a whole other series of things to do. Liturgy hours. It's very beautiful, but the structure of it has changed since the council. Some of those details need to be more still completely worked out. Next, I want to move on to the liturgical year, numbers 102 to 111. And there is not a lot here to kind of go into great detail. I would encourage all of you to read number 106, particularly on the importance of the Lord's Day. The church continues in her official documents to hold up the solemnity of the Lord's Day, particularly as being a feast of feasts. And so that's a weekly thing. The Lord's Day is not something that comes around once in a while, but every 8 days is we understand in the church. Number 108 is important because it's something that did change significantly proper of time is given preference over the feast and the saints, so that the entire cycle of the mysteries of salvation may be suitably recalled. And what this means is, instead of having literally a feast day every day, and so that there was barely ever just a burial day, so to speak, an ordinary day, the church saw to it that we would more deeply explore the unfolding revelation of God and His love for us in the liturgy, specifically through preaching on the daily readings. And so, while the saints have not been suppressed officially, we don't encourage as wide a devotion, particularly because the church is also fit that we would more deeply concentrate on the work of our Lord Jesus Christ Himself, specifically in the working of the economic Trinity, Father, Son, and Spirit. And that's a big word, economic Trinity, that I don't have time to explain. Basically, what the church was wanting to do is get away from all these saint days, because she felt like maybe our focus becomes so much on people and not on God Himself. So that's a due caution, I think, to be weary of that horizontal dimension to the saints, even though they are leading us to the greatness of the divine. We need to always be centered and have a Christ-centered life in our liturgy. However, one of the dangers of this revision is that it largely made, for many people, the devotion became very fast. Not fast, but there was an inherent devotion in which many people experienced a lack of real connection to the liturgy. So their devotion to St. Joseph, the Holy Trinity itself. Once we stop saying devotion to masses, kind of lost the track. So some of you know that I've personally undertaken the responsibility and shared that with my brother priest, that we have to encourage more devoted masses, because devotion to the Holy Trinity is a good thing. It leads us to God Himself. Devotion to our Blessed Mother leads us to God Himself. And so there's not a danger, but we just always have to be cautious of what is the orientation of all this undertaking. Is it towards God Himself, or is it for our own well-being and my own good? So I encourage you to always be speaking with your priest if there's a particular devotion maybe that you want to know more about, or maybe there's a mass that you'd like to have offered sometime, to ask them about it. There's no harm in that. The worst you can do is say no, and most likely there's a space for the priest to help them. So just be aware of why the liturgical year points us, how it's pointing us more generally towards the salvation of Christ, and specifically now in the post-conciliar era, seeing how the proper time has precedence over the proper sense. All right, now I want to turn to the two most exciting aspects of this document left to be discussed: sacred music and sacred art and architecture. Sacrosanctum Concilium 112 states, "The musical tradition of the universal church is a treasure of inestimable value, greater than that of any other art. The main reason for this preeminence is that, as a combination of sacred music and words, it forms a necessary or integral part of the solemn liturgy." So I want to discuss the importance of this statement kind of line by line. The musical tradition of the universal church is a treasure of inestimable value, greater than that of any other art. The church, in her estimation, looks upon no form of art as highly equal upon sacred music. Not music literally, sacred music specifically. And this distinction is very important. The main reason, go on to say, is that it's a combination of sacred music and words. So, sacred music and words foundationally are what is understood here as being of most importance to the church. Because it forms what? A necessary and integral part of the liturgy. So we have to evaluate what we consider sacred music. We have to look at it in this light. We have to understand the sacred music, what it is and what it is not. It's a necessary and integral part of sacred liturgy. The solemn liturgy is actually the word used. And so, sacred music and the words associated therein must lead us into a deeper understanding of what it is we're doing, that being and doing, understanding why and what. Starting to understand more fully that the liturgical music, the sacred music that we have and that we use is to help explain and understand better what is going on. So the words themselves are important. It can't just be a hodgepodge. It can't just be, a good Robert Frost horn. These words need to be integrated fully into understanding what it is we're doing in liturgy. So it goes on to speak of a few more important aspects. The sacred music is to be considered the more holy, so it's more holy, the more closely connected it is with the liturgical action. So it needs to be connected to the liturgical action. Whether making prayer more pleasing, promoting unity of mind, or conferring greater solemnity upon the sacred rites themselves, the purpose, this is a massive statement, the purpose of sacred music is the glory of God and the sanctification of men. And so there's an intrinsic relationship between the music, sacred music, and the actions themselves. And that relationship is holiness. Is the music in accord with the actions, this in accord with this, produces in effect a certain sense of holiness. And so we have to think about how does the music we choose in the liturgy conform with the liturgical actions themselves, lead us into deeper holiness. And I'm going to ask some devil's advocate questions, because I want us to really think about this. When we have, at the beginning of Mass, we have a procession, right? The priest processes into the sanctuary, reverences the altar, and goes to the seat. So in that procession, what do we typically do? We typically sing an hymn, right? Or an anthem. We sing something that usually is a little grand, maybe. And it typically will fall under two categories. Generically, it will either be praise or it will be welcoming. But what's actually happening? The priest is going from the back of the church to the front of the church to reverence the altar. What's the very first thing he's going to do after he reverences the altar? He's going to start with the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. And so this action has specific words that are accorded with the rest of the liturgy. And this is simply called an interlude. And we recite this daily pretty often. As we're doing the burial text, you'll know that before the priest actually invokes the Blessed Trinity, we recite out of the midst of the interlude. The interlude is intimately related to the rest of the text of the liturgy. And so it's the first thing we hear in understanding what's going to kind of unfold in today's Mass. If I'm singing a song up here about, I'm not going to pick on it because I love it, but St. Francis has got kind of the hymn, All Creatures of Our God and King. Great hymn, love it, like the music. I don't know that every week singing All Creatures of Our God and King is going to actually help me to understand better what's going on in this liturgical action, and then let alone the rest of the Mass. So we have to look at how each piece of music is related to what's going on in the Mass, in the text of the Mass itself. We look at the different elements of the Mass to understand how they inform one another and how it informs us what is the purpose of sacred music? And it says very clearly, the purpose of sacred music is the glory of God and the sanctification of the faith. So it's got a vertical and a horizontal dimension. And we always want to be aware of that. How is it leading us to glorify God? Well, principally, this is going to be done, and this is one of the big philosophical principles of the whole council, is going to be done through the liturgy itself. The liturgy is going to lead us into glorifying God more faithfully, because we're starting to understand how the whole relationship of liturgy works. But of inestimable value, to quote the document, to quote the council, it's necessary that we understand the relationship of the liturgy and the music to the liturgy. And so we can't go into, kind of go into a mentality where I'm going to make the liturgy, or I'm going to make the music, sacred music, something other than what it is. And largely, unfortunately, this did happen. A lot of people have wanted to adopt secular music into a divine liturgical action. And so, for instance, inserting one of John Denver's songs into a Mass, according to the Second Vatican Council, would be entirely inappropriate. And has no, for the person who said, no, that's in the document somewhere, no, it's not. At any point. And none of the 150 instructions that followed after the Council was it ever deemed appropriate to use secular music to inform the way we do sacred worship. And so we have to really chew on that. What is the purpose of sacred music? Glorify God and sanctify ourselves. And so we have to look critically at the music we choose in Mass. And this largely falls to Brian Burkay here at the Cathedral. It falls to a group of people who have, in my opinion, by no fault of their own, not near the amount of education that's really necessary for the job. I mean, Father Bernhard is spending years of his life learning about liturgy so that he, in some way, can share that gift with the rest of us. Musicians who get doctorates in music, in musical theory, still need to learn about liturgy, because that's what sacred music is about. It's not just about the music, it's about the liturgical music. And so, for many of us who maybe participate in the choir at a church, or who are just kind of wondering how can we more faithfully do what the church is asking us to do, look very simply at what the resources you provided. Look at your missalets. The communion antiphon, the introit, the offertory antiphon, which is often on our missalets. All of these things are proper music for the day because they complement the entirety of the liturgy. And we see how all the pieces fit together and they're not disjointed. So on this past Sunday, for instance, as we celebrated Veterans Day, we sing a patriotic hymn leading Mass. Now, how is that okay? Because the end of Mass is done whenever it's the sign of peace. The rest of it really is just getting out of the church. And so a patriotic song is fitting because it's a good expression of our culture, certainly, but also because it's not liturgically important. I mean, I hate to say that's the truth. The American national anthem is not a liturgical act. It's part of us getting out of the church, and it's a good way as a community to recognize who we are as persons and thanking God for the gift of our veterans. But things like that are not germane to the liturgy itself. And so I could go on with many colorful examples. I'm sure many of you have them in your own history. But really investigating what is it about sacred music that's so important. It's important because we need to realize that sacred music is that. It's sacred. It's not secular. It's not to be influenced in an undue way by secular notions. And this will get kind of played out a little bit more as Sacrosanctum goes on. Sacrosanctum Concilium 113 says liturgical worship is given a more noble form when the divine offices are celebrated solemnly in song. And this is why we sing so much on Sundays and Holy Days here at the Cathedral. You'll probably notice we sing Mass a lot more than other places. It's not because Father McLaughlin and I like to hear ourselves sing, trust me. Far cry from the truth. But it's what the church is asking us to do, very specifically, she says here in 113. She goes on to say it in a document called Sacramental about 15 times. We need to be singing the liturgy because this is the way this is. This is the way when it says temple. They were singing. They were hearing the Word of God proclaimed in a sung voice. And so we need to continue to try to enculturate that reality, or make that part of the reality of our liturgical celebrations. Sacrosanctum Concilium 114 says, the sacred treasury of sacred music is to be preserved and cultivated with great care. Choirs must be assiduously developed, especially in the cathedral churches. So the cathedral choir holds a place of preeminence in the life of the diocese because they're kind of supposed to be the example to the masses. That's why we typically try to have our best trained musicians present in our cathedral choir. But there's also the role that they play to the rest of the diocese as being a model, an example. And we have to cultivate that. So one of the things that we can do as the lay faithful, and you can do as the lay faithful, is talk to your pastors about what kind of money you're actually spending on sacred music. And again, I'm not a pastor, so I can say this. But honestly, I mean, I hope that people come up and say, Father, are we paying anybody to do church music? In your small parish, like Diboll, Texas, so there might be one lady who's voluntarily singing. Well, you know what? You're spending $10,000 on keeping a light on in an office that is occupied twice a week. Turn the light off, hire a musician. It's going to help people to minister. So I want to encourage you to take that challenge to your pastors and say, Father, this is something that the council clearly called for with good music, good choirs. What are we doing to promote that? And finally, before we go into a short break, I want to talk about the role of the Gregorian chant. Sacrosanctum Concilium 116 says the Church recognizes Gregorian chant as being especially suited to the Roman liturgy. Therefore, other things being equal, it should be given pride of place in the liturgical services. This is our experience. No, did it seem like after the council everybody said, no more chant? Let's play our guitars, let's get our drums, whatever, or maybe we'll sing it all and we'll talk. That's not what the document or the church asked for. It's clearly not what the council thought. And why does it say that the Gregorian chant is especially suited to the Roman liturgy? Primarily because the Gregorian chant has been the complement to Roman liturgy since about the 4th or 5th century, and particularly it was codified in the 7th and 8th centuries. And so it has a very long-standing relationship with the liturgy. But why is that so? Principally looking at it, Gregorian chant is much more natural to us. This is where the music theory comes in a little bit. It's much more natural to us than we would think. Singing songs that we often sing on Sunday mornings requires a high level of musical training. You have to be able to read notes. You have to be able to realize what the difference between a bar is, what a measure is, half note, whole note, all these different things. Gregorian chant worked on the human level. It took into account the natural tendencies of a person's ability to breathe for 8 quarters. It took into a person's natural range so that you're not having to sing down here and up here in one song. But it really looks to establish, within basically a 3 or 4 note range, how we can look at a person, an illiterate person who may not ever be able to read a book in their life, but if they come to Mass every week for years and years, they know those hymns like the back of their hand. That's the beauty of chant. And many of you, I think, who didn't experience it for 20 years, it's been like the light got turned on some time ago, we started hearing it again. Did it take you long to catch up? No. Because it's something you heard, and it's something very natural to us. It really stems from understanding who we are as persons and how we sing and how our bodies all put together. Chant's a much more natural expression of how we would like to sing. How do we have more chant? We just do it. And we've been doing that here at the cathedral, I think, quite a bit. We're getting there. Who can help us with this? You can. Get on the internet. Listen to Gregorian chant. It's not hard. And most of it's been translated into English. So we can even do Gregorian chant in English. Which that may help us. Like maybe the Latin is too out of touch. Well, most Gregorian chant modes are easily translatable into English. We have books and books of this stuff to look at. It's just a matter of, kind of taking the time on your own to kind of start learning. And don't be afraid to ask me. I can point you in the right direction with some of these documents or with some of these resources. But getting back to the reason the church is telling chant up is because it's a universal expression of faith. If we go to Moses, I go to Lima, Peru, if I go to the far reaches of the east, we can hear in that beautiful universal language, Latin and glory chant, what it means to be one in the body of Christ. And so it's being revered and continues to be used